It's already recording, guys.
Сосема на кратко, веќе дојде 1 час и 5 минути. Сосема на кратко сакам да кажам дека ова истражување представува плод на една успешна соработка помеѓу Министерството за труд и социјална политика и UNDP. Контекстот во кој што се случува и позадината на ова истражување е дека во моментов се подготвува стратегија за родова еднаквост и заедно со колешката Марија Спасовска сме дел од секторот за еднакви можности во МТСП. Имаме посебна задача да работиме на поглавието за климатски промени во стратегијата за родова еднаквост. Во пошироката слика секако влегува и стратегијата за климатска акција која што се подготвува во Министерството за животна средина. Фала ви на сите за времето. Се надаме дека ќе биде интересно. Имаме собрано околу 1223 приказни од сите региони во Македонија и да не ложам многу, би сакал да ја поканам нашата експертка Катуна Сандрашвили од UNDP Грузија, која што работи со оваа алатка SenseMaker, да почне со презентацијата. Ви благодарам на сите уште еднаш за времето. Катуна, повели.
I can speak, right? I was following you in Macedonian because I could. So thank you very much for wonderful attendance, first of all. I mean, we are ready to start 5 minutes ago. Thank you very much for the introduction, Philip. We have very little time for work today online. Practically, we are doing 2-day workshop in 2 hours. That's why I will not be able to. I know the list of invitees and I know approximately who we are in the room. As Philip mentioned, I work in UNDP Georgia and I have been helping other country offices as part of the regional innovation team on actionable data pilots, which is combination of quantitative and qualitative research. This is our second research in Macedonia in the last 1 year, and I'm very happy to present what we've learned, the data that we have gathered so far. I would like first to tell you how we will organize ourselves to make sure that we use our time very efficiently, right? And also, we will need to, it will not be presentation by me. I will ask you to be active participants. Yeah, so there will be many questions from my end and that I will ask you to answer, because the nature of this research is that experts are the people who are going to use this data, not me, right? So this is one thing. So there will be many questions and I will expect you to actively participate. Please feel free in English or Macedonian. Translation is provided, so there will be no restriction. If you are hesitant to speak, please feel free to type in the chat. Again, in Macedonian, in English, it doesn't matter, whichever you feel comfortable about. And I had one more point to say, but I'm forgetting, so we can start right away. Is there any questions before I start the presentation? No? Everybody can hear me well? Or translator? Yeah, good. Now, those of you, I wanted to ask how many of you were part of the, can you please raise hands, if you can raise hands in the participants, how many of you attended the workshop when we designed the questionnaire for the research? If you could, yeah, yes. So do we have some mixed group or not all people? Excellent, great. So many people are from the group. So those of you who were part of that workshop, you know that what we did is, this is not a traditional questionnaire. We asked people to remember a specific experience extreme weather conditions. On the screen, you can see it in Macedonian. That was placed on the website. And then after giving this story to us, we asked additional questions. And these additional questions we will walk through step by step. As Philip already mentioned, with the support of the volunteers from the faculty, as well as support research team, we managed to collect over 1,000 stories, and we analyzed the stories. The analysis rested on the stories that remembered specific experience, because some people could not remember. So we still recorded them, but there were not many, 63. Our task today is to see the key findings of the research, what the data tells us, and to work together with you to make sense of it. What does it mean, knowing this data, understanding what people said in practice? How do we translate the data into action? So that's why your attention and engagement is very important, because next steps of the from the government side, from international community, local governance, or other actors will be defined by today's discussion as well. So I will move to the analysis directly, because we are very short in time and I want to have more time for discussions. As I told you, we not only collected stories, which is qualitative data, but also quantitative data. If you can see on the screen, you will see that we collected data in almost all the regional centers in Macedonia, and the range, the highest percentage in each is just about 7%, not fully 8%, but most of the responses come from Bitola, Aerodrom, if I pronounce them correctly, Kumanovo, as you can see, and Tetovo. And the rest more or less following Skopje as well. But our interest was very much focused on not only the capital, but also beyond what is happening outside as well. Now, next one, I will present the data together with you, okay? So I want everybody, I will put this link in the chat box, and I want all of you to open this page. Those of you who cannot, just shout, just say it. Yeah. You can, if anybody cannot open the page, tell me. Okay. So this is, what happens is that when we do the research, then there is an automatic analysis tool created by a sense-making tool, which is called SenseMaker, created by the company Cognitive Edge. However, to access this analysis tool, you have to be authorized to access it. So in order for people to be able to access the data, for the wider group to access the data, we created this pilot website to allow many people to have access and to some level be able to analyze the data themselves. Okay. I will share my screen now. Could everybody access the page? Anybody who could not access the page? Yeah. You can follow me then. So this is the website, and I will try to give you the, I will try to walk you through this website. What does it represent? We have filtered the data. I'm sorry, guys, somebody's microphone is making noise for me. Could you please mute yourselves if you are not speaking? Yeah. Thank you. And so what I'm doing is, we have filters of the data. we can feel it is in English. If you have problem with following me in English, please let me know. Yeah. We can filter the data by different filters. For example, gender of the respondents, age of the respondents, where they live, urban, rural, ethnical distribution. Because today we are discussing about the gender differences in terms of climate change, I will click on gender. And you see here that automatically female and male and other categories are highlighted in different colors. Now, I can tell you that here in the corner, you can see how many participants participate in total, 1,223. But if I want to understand how many respondents are female, all I need to do is click on female. And then I will know how many female participants we had, 648. I forgot to mention in the beginning that this is not I'm sorry, I forgot to turn off, but I didn't want to turn off. This is not a traditional inquiry. We do not interview people as such. We ask them to go through the questionnaire and answer the questions themselves without the intermediary, whenever it is possible, to make sure that they give answer anonymously without mentioning any. That's why we say respondents, but actually these are participants of the survey. So we have 648 in total of women responding. To unclick this, I can click and place it somewhere else. Then male respondents, we have 574, and the coloring of this changes as well. There is one person who categorized his or her gender as other. All right. Now, according to the same logic, I can tell you that we can, for example, see age distribution of the total respondents. 477 people were of the age group between 30 and 49. But I can also see women who were of the same age, and they are 259. Of these, I can also filter women living in rural villages, and these are 85. So I'm reducing them one by one. And I can also see whether they are Macedonian or not, if I'm interested. And then 47 of women aged 30, 49, living in rural areas and Macedonian are altogether 47. Are you following me? Are you able to follow me? Yeah, you can unmute yourselves and tell me.
Yes.
Yeah? Excellent. Good. Now, what I want to ask you is, since you already know how this looks, I can tell you that we have 47 altogether. We have 47 of men who participated, 53% of women. So we had more or less equal distribution. We have more urban residents interviewed, 65%, than rural. Yeah. And the highest group, of the most numerous group in this inquiry, 42% of respondents was between the age of 30 and 49. And the next biggest group is 50 to 64 with 33%. Okay? So this is what we can learn right from the beginning. We can also see what is the, do you see the presentation or the website?
The website.
The website, okay. I will stop this one, and because I want you to see the presentation at the moment. Sorry about this. Yeah. We have looked at the education level of our respondents, and the majority of them are of secondary education, followed by vocational education and bachelor's degrees. They're more or less equal. And then we have primary, and the least were of doctoral degrees. Majority in terms of national ethnic background, the majority of respondents are Macedonian, and 21% Albanian, but we also had Serbian, Roma, Turkish, Bosnian, Vlasi, and other nationalities, ethnic people of ethnic background that participated. In terms of marital status, 70% of respondents are either married or living together, and 25% are single, and then less widowed and divorced. Yeah. In the areas where they are employed or working, interestingly, 17.5%, nearly 18% of the respondents are working in the public sector, government, or unemployed, nearly equal number. And equal number of respondents work in the service sector and agriculture, and some in manufacturing. We have 7% of students and retired, more or less. It was interesting to look at the income level of the respondents, but because we couldn't ask for this question directly, we inquired about the type of dwelling, the residence or house they lived in, and 63% of respondents reported they live in a house that is owned by the family or themselves, and 20% in a flat. Less respondents said that they were living with the parents or in the rented house. In terms of the vulnerability status, 14% of respondents said that they lived in an extended family with low income. We had up to 4% of people over 65 years of age living alone and with low income. And less group was of single parent headed households with low income, but we were able to identify these groups as well. Are we comfortable with the information so far? Following well? Yeah, good.
Yes.
Excellent. So I would like us, all of you, to go to the website and perform a very simple task. Okay? Could you please tell me what is the breakdown? What is the smallest group by age of women? Can you tell me? If you go to the website and filter. Yeah, we can do it together, and you can say it out loud or write in the chat box. It doesn't matter. I will also go there and try to see the smallest age group of women. Yeah. So what you need to do is you need to filter female and then different age groups. Yeah. Anybody managed so far to quickly go through?
Yes, you have already answers in the chat box.
Yes, 65 and older. Okay, excellent.
Congratulations, Martin. You were the fastest.
Yes, excellent. So practically, you guys know how to work with the system. Most of you know. If you have any questions during the breakout sessions, you will have people who will help you. But I want to go. We will break into two groups. We are going to have quite big groups. You can have the discussion in Macedonian, but you have a particular task to follow. Let me. Do you see the presentation or the website? Can you tell me, please? Sorry for asking. Presentation?
Presentation, yes.
Good. Then you will be able to see the task that I'm going to show you. Group 1, those people who will go to group 1 will work on male respondents. And group 2 will go to female respondents group. They will only work on the female group. Yeah. For group 1, I want you to look at the male respondents living in rural area, married, with primary education and owning a land. Yes, you will have 10 minutes to, I will put this in the chat box and this task, and feel free to copy it for yourselves. And you will have 10 minutes to find out this group, how many of them are all together, and how many people from this group speak about transportation. Yeah. Philip, you can afterwards, and Maria, you can afterwards say it in Macedonian at the group discussion. So this is task for the group 1, right? Okay. And now we are going to have a task for group 2, which will work about women respondents. And we want to identify a group of women living in rural area, married, with secondary education and owning a land. Yeah. And we have 2 questions. How many of them are in total, this group? And how many talk about water supply and irrigation? Yeah, I will put this in the chat box as well. We will now break out into, please copy this criteria because you will not be able to see the chat in the groups. We will now go into the breakout rooms, maximum 10 minutes. It should, you will need even less. And when we're back, I will want groups to present their answers. Is all clear?
Yeah, okay.
Excellent. Philip, we are ready to go out to breakout rooms.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very useful experience, Katuna. Thank you. What's next?
I think my screen sharing has gone, so I have to share it again. I wanted to ask everybody if you were able to get to the texts, to the stories. I'm sure that you found we are able to filter, but did you get to the stories?
Yes, we did.
Excellent. So in my case, I will quickly walk you through. Do you have any questions or comments, first of all, about this exercise? And I have to move translation into English to understand translation. So please feel free to speak in Macedonian. Yeah. Any questions, any comments about this by now? No. Okay. So for the first group, there were two people who were speaking about transportation. Yeah, the male group that I could identify. Maybe I was, and this is their story. Their story says that this affected him. I think it's a man, yeah, male, negatively. It's not the thing that happens often. That particular incident happened once, and it was an incident of extreme heat. But I can also find out from these filters, which is automatically filtered, that the way he reacted was he decided to plan to do something about it and thought about the impact of it. What he used most was his own knowledge and materials and tools, and who helped was private companies for him. At least these are the answers that respondents mark themselves. So some of we are talking about perceptions of people. This is not a kind of definitive, like math calculated thing. We're looking at how people perceive these issues, right? And interestingly, about the decision-making process in terms of who made the decision to act or not to act, it was his own decision. And budgetary decision making was also his. This person doesn't do anything yet to reduce greenhouse emissions in everyday life. I mean, he hasn't, or maybe is not aware of there are practices that something like this can be done. And right at the bottom, you can have all the full respondent profile, that it's a male aged 50-64, rural, Macedonian, married, with primary education in a privately owned house, and he doesn't consider himself to be in any of the vulnerable groups. Yeah. So this is about the female respondents, about the group that worked on the female respondents. From my experience, there were 3 people only from this group. And one of the stories referred to, for example, water supply and irrigation is like this. I just clicked one of them. Again, it's a negative experience, one-off, pertains to rainfall and flooding as reported by the respondent. This person did something, acted immediately, and used people and networks, and private company was the one that helped her, was instrumental. Again, this person doesn't say that she's doing anything at the moment for reducing greenhouse emissions in practice in daily life. And we have an interesting aspect about household level decision making. She says that she decided how to act, what to do, but who managed the budget was neither she nor her partner. It was somebody else. All right, and later we will talk about this finding group. And full profile of the respondent is a woman, age 30-49, living in rural areas, Macedonian, married, with secondary education, living with parents, and owning a household, land and vehicle, lovely, and does not consider herself, doesn't report to be of any vulnerable group. Was I clear up till now? And I want to open the floor for a discussion. And please, what do you think? What are your reflections? What do you think of the visualization? Anything that comes to your mind, really. Please, in English, in Macedonian, doesn't matter. I really need to hear you. Yeah.
Or in the chat box if you're not able to, if you don't have microphone.
Exactly. If you don't have microphones, please feel free to type in the chat box. Yeah. Was it easy to use the site? Was it easy to navigate?
Yes, it was really easy to navigate, and thank you so much for sharing this with us, Katuna. It's really interesting work, and it's really powerful to see the stories themselves and not just numbers.
Thank you, Emma. Any other reflections? Was it anything difficult? We will not be able to work if you don't speak, guys. So let it be in Macedonian, it's fine.
Well, yes, it was very, very interesting. I did get two different responses in one of the filtering sessions. I guess first time usage always has some challenges, let's say, though it's actually very, very easy to use it, and it is very useful. Thank you very much for sharing.
Great. That's what I needed to hear. So there is not much of problems that are associated. Now we can go with the rest of the analysis because I want to have more time for the discussion session on the actions. I have one request to you. I would like to request you to make notes as we go on now, on paper, in the chat, wherever you want, because at the end, in the second half of our session, you will have to remember what we discussed, and it's too much information to remember afterwards. Okay? So I will try to be as explicit as possible. And the situations, but you make your notes, please, or what you find interesting, or if you have any question about this issue. The situations that people shared with us were mainly attributed to disaster management, as the respondents themselves felt that it was a disaster management. And less, it was 75% approximately, and then less of them were about agricultural activities, like 7.6%, and 5.2% were health. These were kind of the biggest groups. However, for the analysis sake, sometimes even looking at the stories which are shared by a very small number of people, we can get into signals that are not reported by the majority, but that might become a problem in the future. So when going into deeper analysis, sometimes we explore, that's why I asked you to look into that very tiny group of male respondents who speak about transportation, for example. So what was specifically that person was talking about, although the same story could have been easily attributed to agriculture, right? Wasn't it? Am I right? I read it in the Google Translate. So if I'm not right, tell me. Now, in terms of how often these situations happen that people remembered for us, most of them, as they said, 48% happened once that they remembered, but also the other half, 45%, says sometimes, and 7% said it happens all the time. So practically, the issues that both men and women brought to the table for us, based on this data, are quite predominant. I mean, they're quite prevalent for them. And this is when we filtered the stories, we tried to look at the topic of agriculture activities, which have negative impact on people and happens all the time. And this is the story which was told by 65-year-old resident. I don't know if I'm saying the right Actionable. And
Yeah.
somebody needs to read it in Macedonian because my Macedonian is very poor.
Океј. Јас се занимавам со пчеларство поради честите врнежи на дожд во време на медоносните месеци, кога природата е расцветана, приносот е многу намален, а беше зголемено и угинувањето на пчелни семејства поради развој на болести, поради влажното време. Машко над 65 години од пекчева.
So we tried, what we do with this today's discussion is that first we look at the numbers, at the patterns, how they outline, and only then we look at the stories, how they express, whether they can really correspond to the picture that is given by the data. The next data is the effect of these events that have of climate extreme weather conditions. The overwhelming majority, nearly all the stories, 82% of stories are negative. Very few are positive, and I even have one positive story somewhere. If it is not here illustrated, I think there was a story of a greenhouse, right? Where, because, yeah, we have that story here. Sometimes these extreme weather conditions, if they do have even positive sides to this. Most of the causes of these calamities are falling on rainfall or flooding mainly, or extreme heat and drought. Although others like wind, snow, and hail were also mentioned by the respondents. Yeah. Anything so far, does it make sense to you? If there is something that you object to it, you think it's not true, please feel free to jump in. So this is one of the stories which is looking at the disaster management as people reported. And mainly it was reported about flooding. Philip, could you please read?
Yes. Бев дома кога почна да врне силно дожд и бидејќи сме близу реката, коритото како многу брзо се наполни и водата почна да излегува и на главната и споредни улици. Носеше песок и тиња, куките до патот на водата им навлезе во дворовите. Жена од 50 до 64 години од Тетово.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have to say something here. One of my first projects that I worked on was a story of Roma in Serbia. They were researching housing issue. They had a big project on housing, and it was not particularly successful. And the narrative research was conducted to understand what Roma themselves were thinking about this. And the only reason they were able to engage them at a larger scale, by the way, they had a lot of respondents, was the fact that while collecting the data, while answering these questions, they didn't have an intermediary. And that the methodology that we was allowing to share their stories as they told them without interpretation. So based on the findings of that research, the team was able to obtain even bigger funding to revise the project and shift the focus from housing to freedom of movement, documentation for Roma, because this is education and healthcare. This is what people were saying were of primary importance. Now, if we go back to our analysis, this is responses, how people responded to the situation. The most common response to climate change related situations was either to plan to do something, act on it, or think about possible implications. Some people observed as well. There were some group of people, and you see the breakdown between men and women. 43% of women think about possible implications in the future, while planning what to do was mainly reported by men. Okay. Those of you who were part of the first session know that some of the questions we asked people to reply by looking at the triad, and I will explain this to those who were not part of this exercise. And we asked a question, for example, how did you deal with this situation? And we give answers in the form of a triangle. Secured new resources, that's how I dealt, used resources that I already had in a different way, or connected to others. I did something together with others. And every respondent could put a dot somewhere in the triangle, implying that this, or it could have been one corner, or in the middle of these two sides, I had my own resources and secured more, or I did all three. Now, on this triangle, you can see the overall picture, visual picture of the answers. The darker the sections are, if you go very deep into this, you will see tiny, tiny dots. Each dot is a respondent, each respondent. And the more the concentration of the answers, which means majority of people, this is the way majority of people responded. In this particular case, what we see is that the majority of people, we made then put the shadows on top to make it easier to perceive. The majority of people said that they used resources in a different way, right? Or they worked together with others, like community effort. Very few report about securing new resources. However, we made this visualization into male and female respondents breakdown. And do you see any difference here now by the answers between men and women? Can anybody shout or put it in the chat? See? So this is the same. Used resources they had in a different way. It's the same for men and women. What about this corner here and this corner here? And this corner here and this corner here. Any observations? Yes, I have somebody in the chat.
I can see that males secured new resources more than females did.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Men report more, securing more resources. And here also, connection to others is here, for example, much more highlighted by women. And this is the story when people marked, they shared their story and they said that they used resources in a different way. Philip, if you could read it, please.
Yes. Дел од куките во познатото мало во Битола Јени Мале беа поплавени со вода. Криобилните врнежи од дожд, па затоа со дел од комшиите со пумпи ја вадевме водата од поплавените куки и во дел од нив ја вадевме по кукињата за да не ја оштети водата која беше навлезена во подрумите, односно совите. Машко од Битола помеѓу 30 и 49 години.
Thank you very much, Philip. And there is one more story here. In this case, when the situation affected positively. And what is that story?
Како екстремно климатски настан со кој се загрозува животната средина, би го навела палењето на шумите во повисоките планински места околу Скопје, при што пожарот поради недостапен терен гореше скоро една недела, како еден венец од оган. За среќа, еден ден заврна, дожд и огнот го угаси, инаку последиците за шумската вегетација и живиот свет се катастрофални. Обично не се обновуваат шумите. Големи и важни сообраќајници од возила и автобуси поминуваат низ центарот на градови во државата наместо се надвор од градот. Случка. За време на големата поплава во Стековци, големата вода по каналот кој доаѓа од Рачиново поплави дел од куките во Илинден. Имаше дел каде жител узурпирал простор покрај канал, насади ловошки и не дозволуваше интервенција на општинскиот багер. Сепак, со асистенција на полиција, Багерот влезе на узурпираниот имот и направи насип и спречи поплава од поголеми размери од жена на помеѓу 50 и 64 години од општина Илинден. Поради промена на климата, се потопли зими се уште имаме краставици за берење. Минатата година, поради високите температури, имавме краставици и домати до декември. Маж помеѓу 50 и 64 години од општина Илинден.
Thank you. So, practically, yeah, this is the first kind of key finding here, that men, can you, if we could have reflections here, so far, whatever you have heard, do you agree with this? Do you disagree? What is the first thing that comes to your mind? Can you please? I'm fine if you do this in Macedonian, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Thanks, Philip. Yeah. Okay, we are not very talkative today. The next one is what resources people used. And when we were designing the framework, we thought that we would ask about knowledge. What people used was knowledge, training, materials and tools, people and networks, and financial resources, as well as technology or any other that they could report on. So the pattern of the responses more or less is the same among men and women here, although more women than men, like 31% compared to 25%, reported not acting to deal with the climate change related issues. That was kind of the only minor difference. And in terms of the key, what people used mainly to deal with, what was the knowledge, their own knowledge or other. The next question that we asked people was, what were the things that made it difficult to deal with the situation? Was it lack of knowledge or skills here in this corner, lack of access to resources, or lack of opportunities? And as you can see from the visualization, lack of opportunities was mainly highlighted by both men and women respondents. However, there were respondents who also spoke about lack of access to resources, and we had also a group that was talking about the lack of knowledge. When we looked at men and female distribution, lack of knowledge of skills, relevant skills, was more highlighted by men. And even here, if you see, there is a section between, in the male responses, lack of access to resources coupled with a lack of knowledge. There is a question. I want to ask, how is lack of opportunities different from lack of resources and knowledge skills? It's a very good question, Emma, because when we were designing the framework, I don't remember how we translated it into Macedonian. Usually, when we design the framework in English, the first version, I work with the English version, but for example, when I translated it into Georgian, we might use the phrase which makes the answer more specific. In this particular case, my understanding is that what people meant was that overall access to things, not only knowledge and not only to the resources, but the ability to make things happen in a way. Although this particular question is a bit broader than I would preferably have it. That would be my answer. For example, we will go and see the decision-making aspect, and that clarifies it a bit more. any reflections, anything that we've heard so far that makes you kind of think? Yeah.
Okay, I want to make one very general. And can you hear me well? Because I
I
hear
can
myself.
hear you very, very well. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Well, all of these findings are confirming the traditional gender roles within the family and the society in correlation to climate change.
Yeah.
Well, to summarize some of them, these numbers are confirming the theoretical knowledge that we had so far. Now we have knowledge based on data by these numbers.
Excellent.
And which is more important, now we have stories. Like we have now clear picture what are the gender roles, opportunities, or obstacles, needs, problems, and let's say priorities, behaviors, patterns, etc., regarding climate change situation in each of the societal sectors like agriculture, education, transportation, energy, and other sectors defined within this survey. So so far, I mean, I don't know how many slides more you have. I don't know. I don't
have
want
a couple more.
to waste the.
Yeah, I have some.
Yes,
I have
you
some
have
slides. Yeah.
So I will make another reflection after several
After some slides. Thank you
some
so very
slides,
much,
yes,
Olgita.
but so far this is for the first time a very in-depth analysis and in Macedonia, and I think wider in the region and even more wider, because when it comes to gender and climate change, all of the countries worldwide, they are facing difficulties when to gather data on gender roles in frames of climate change. Now we have that. So thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you so very much, Olgita. And I think if the local community of you guys hadn't worked on the framework, if you didn't guide the process of what were the right questions to ask, we wouldn't have gotten to this data, because I'm not an environmental expert, right? So this is one example of what people reported, and thank you very much to Philippe and Maria who prepared these beautiful visualizations for you, by the way. Philippe?
Го земав детето од училиште со кола и само што тргнавме, дождот се засили многу, така што бришачите не можеше да се постигнат, па морав да застанеме. Сите возила застанаа, дивееше на времето и беше страшно и опасно. Жена помеѓу 30 и 49 години од гостива.
Yeah. So this is what happens. So this is what we face in a daily life when we try to move from abstract to concrete. Like, what is the expression of it? The next question we had, things that had an influence on the way people dealt with the situation. Now, the methodology is designed in such a way that we want people not to talk about general perceptions, but we want people to speak about their specific experience. So these answers refer to one specific experience from their life, not what they generally think. So this is important to consider. Now, what influenced in that particular example of what happened, whether it was flooding, drought, or anything else? Formal training, they say, own experience, or online resources. Here is the formal training, here is the online resources, and here is the own experience. Where is the triangle empty? Can you tell me? Can you tell me where is triangle empty? Where we have no stories?
In the male's triangle, when it comes to online resources and to formal training.
That's right.
Close to formal training.
Close to formal training. Online resources practically are very, very few people reporting to use. Mostly they rely on their own experience or combination of formal training and experience. You see this here. And less people speak about formal training, sorry.
Yeah.
When it comes to male and female respondents, the distribution is more or less the same. However, here we do have a little bit more formal training and online resources is more evident among men than among women. Yeah.
Katuna, I would like to add something here.
Please.
When it comes to online resources, well, my perception of reading the stories and the fact that most of them are related to disaster risk reduction or extreme events that are relevant to flooding. So all these happen very fast.
Yeah.
So people don't have time to search online for resources, and that's why they're backed mostly by their own experience, which on the other hand can be indicator of how important it is to build their experience with regards to climate change. So
or preparedness.
Trainings and capacity building activities so they can react quickly and react properly are very important. So this is very important conclusion that you are bringing it up. And
thank you so very much, Paulina. That would be great to have a note so that in the future. So how do we do that? So how do we build? What will be? That will be part of our after the break. We will have the discussion about what are the findings. Please make a note of it so that we can have the key findings that sound really important, and then what can be done in a general terms at this point, and then we can speak about specific action plans afterwards, what can be done to change the situation for the better. This is the formal training that the person who told this story also said that what influenced her was formal training. It might not be evident from the stories. They might not speak about the training itself, but this is what they mark in their answers. Philip, could you please?
Yes. Ќе раскажам за исчезнувањето на вода која со години назад не се случила. Именно тие води ги користеле повеќе семејства за домашни потреби за пиење, но одеднаш водата се намалува и жителите се приморани да бараат нови извори. Покрај тоа, растителниот свет кој тука околу водата беше богат, автохтон и различен, почнува се менува. Суши исчезнува, пред се еден редок вид на мов маршанција. Со самото тоа почнува и преселба на животни кои храната и водата што ја користеле веќе ја нема. Жена помеѓу 50 и 64 години од Гази Баба.
Yeah. So
yes, sorry, Katuna. I would like to add something here. Even from the without the numbers, we can see the gender roles and gender needs and priorities here by the stories. For example, men's stories are mostly related to the vehicles they are using in the agriculture or the technology they are using, for example, to
resources,
pump the water, yes, from the flood. And women are telling stories in the frames of the usage of water, for the home activities, caregiving activities for children or all elderly people within their homes. So it's
and longer term implication, like in this story, that species are
yes they are that's due to the female, like in theory it is said that female are more concerned for the long-term implications of climate change negative aspects than men, but
so this is
probably confirming that. Yes,
thank you so much. Although I would make a point again, sometimes individual stories can give individual angle so we cannot generalize based on an individual story. What we do is first we look at the patterns, and then we look at the stories that this particular pattern is speaking, illustrating this. So it's important to keep that in mind. Now, what helped in these situations? Before the break, let me finish all the data work, and then we'll do the recommendations part. What helped, and here I will need your help, because for some reason, the answers that we designed in the beginning looked like this. Financial support helped, rules and procedures helped, and infrastructure and technology helped. Interestingly, for example, if I was doing this triad in Georgia, in my context, in my country, we would probably not include rules and procedures. It's contextual, absolutely. People might not relate to it. I'm interested to see here that rules and procedures is prominent here. Many people responded to rules and procedures, what helped in the situations, as well as financial support, and the combination of these two. And infrastructure and technology was also prominent, but more prominent among male, as you rightly said, Olgica, already. Infrastructure and technology focus is more prominent among male respondents here, men, and slightly less among women. And rules and procedures, though, here we have the same thing. So I would like to hear, when we have a discussion session, what could be the implications of rules and procedures that makes it so important for people. Philip, could you please speak about this?
Имам изградено гостителски објект во планина, во природа. Минатата зима од повремените води од дожд и снег ми беше однесена едната платформа која е изградена врз планинската река. Со оглед на тоа што објектот е од полуотворен карактер, морав наново да ја градам дрвената платформа на која беше оштетена. Со оглед на околностите, сам повторно ја поставував. Маж помеѓу 30 и 49 години од Гевгелија.
One of the stories that we had. In fact, you can also explore and see other stories that you think better illustrate the idea that you would be interesting to explore in the future, because what we are now doing is looking at a general picture. In the future, those of you who are only interested in agriculture, for example, you can do the analysis only about the agriculture issues and see how it works there. Or we can only think about rural women, what rural women think about particular issues, what are their implications, etc. Philip, could you please one more story?
Yes. Се стаписав кога видов дека силната надојдена вода влегува во продавницата за обувки. Ги повикав сите од семејството, веќе дуќанот ми е во куќата, и веднаш почнавме со спасување, што може да се спаси. Маж помеѓу 50 и 64 години од Тетово.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. We have only two things to go through. This is what helped. Who helped to deal? Who helped? Not what helped, but who helped. And you have here community, friends, central government, local government, individual, private companies, educational institutions, media, social media, and others. As expected, vast majority of people reported help from families, friends, and neighbors. And it is similar distribution by gender roles. Social media were mentioned by women marginally more than men, 9% versus 6%. Yeah. Local government, although, was more mentioned by men. There was more reference to local government by men than women. And one of the most interesting aspects for me to analyze was perception about the decision-making roles. A decision to act, to do something about that particular situation, who has the decision-making power. On the left, you see the male respondents, how men responded, and on the right, you see how women responded. Men think that in more than half of the cases, 55% of cases, they are the ones who decide what action to take. And 30% of women think that women are the ones who make decisions. However, joint decision making is highlighted more by women than men. Women, 31% of women say we both decide together, and 23% of men think that the decision making is joint. However, in both cases, among men and women, there is a category other, which says that decision making happens by somebody else in the family, not by a couple or men or a woman. We suspect that this could be, it's 18% in men and 21% in women. It could be parents, older generation, because we have similar distribution, more or less, about the budget management. Here, the difference is even more. 47% of men think that they make decisions, and only 29% of women think that they have ability to decide on financial matters. Both differences between the both is slightly bigger here. Less men think that joint decision making on finances is happening, 23%, and 32% of women think that they do it jointly. The other group, again, is 26 and 29%, respectively.
Sorry, I have a question here.
Please.
Maybe if there is a cross-reference made between the category other and then the age of the respondents, we could see whether it's issue of who brings the decision, if it's, let's say, younger people who might not have resources or be in a position to bring the decision, that this is why there is this other category. If it is not so, then it would be really, really very interesting to see who are these adult people who let someone else decide for them, and who is that other. Which are the situation. Maybe it was a situation where a decision had to be made by let's say, a local government or some other institution. So that might be very interesting to see whether really it is influenced by gender.
Yeah, primarily. Absolutely. Emilia, thank you so very much for this reflection. In fact, we will have a break in about 10 minutes. You have the link to the website. Please feel free to play with it and try to filter based on the decision making, based on the age groups, and see if you can drill down and find out something from there. And if not, we can surely keep it on board for further exploration, because it's a very, very interesting point. Practically, this is our last slide from, these are key findings presentation. We are not going into very detailed kind of thing. And this is about reducing greenhouse emissions. This question didn't refer to the experience they shared. This was simply asked because we were interested also not in preparedness, but also mitigation. And we wanted to know how many people actually are aware, what is the perception, awareness level, whether people understand that these actions really can reduce greenhouse emissions like everyday life. So the more or less, the strategies are the same by men, and responses by men and women. The majority of respondents says that no intentional action was taken by them. And if action was taken, house insulation and using more efficient home appliances were the most common one. More men reported not taking any action compared to women, 39% versus 29%. House insulation and using more efficient appliances, many women reported cycling to work instead of driving, and recycling waste, as well as using more user-friendly heating. The most common action for men, in addition to insulation, was using more efficient appliances. Olgica, here you are right again, confirming your what you said, and growing own fruits and vegetables. Now, interestingly, eating less meat was reported by 18% of women and only 9% of men, as well as more women are reported on using eco-friendly packaging. All right. This is the end, and I'm very happy to say that we are in time for our break. Before we go to the break, I hope you were making notes. Can you share key points that you remember now? Yeah. Anything that, before we go to break, because when you go to break, you will forget. So I want you to just throw whatever remained in your head at the moment, whatever you reflected or anything. You can put in the chat as well.
Well, there was another issue, if I may.
Please.
When the results about what was most useful, own knowledge, online sources, etc.
Yeah.
What came into mind was that maybe we could see again another cross-reference between the type of experiences reported by those who used online resources. So then we would know whether maybe these stories are long-term stories, let's call them that way, not immediate danger or catastrophe or something of that sort. And that is why they were able to report that online resources were more useful to them.
So who was the one who, if reported online, what was that online? What was the online and who reported? Very good question. And who reported? And then another question was about the other, right? You asked the same question. Cross-reference to age groups, right? And who could be further exploration. What's the next one? Next reflection. Pavlina, you had about formal education, or who had the formal education? Preparedness, yeah? Preparedness, education or skills building. What else? Anything else that was relevant that we mentioned? You can type in the chat as well. Pavlina was writing, most of stories show negative experiences. Yes, that's right. Yes. And it will be interesting to see what was the positive, where people see the positive. For me, that's my personal thing. Anything else? Anything else that we could go deeper that would help in the future?
Yes. Me слушате?
Yes, Ивана. Thank you.
Јас би сакала да споделам, мене ми западна на воко дека во прв план за справување со вакви катастрофи помагаат правила и процедури. Тоа значи дека на луѓето некако им е важен тој ред, контекст, дисциплина. Тие треба да знаат што да прават во такви ситуации. Потоа гледаме дека се финансите за справување, ама тоа е веќе понатаму, за да се справат со последиците, им требаат финанси, технологија и знаење и што се им треба. Но во првиот план гледам дека правилата и процедурата, она што вие во Грузија дури не сте го имале предвид, овде кај нас се спинува како на пиедесталот некако. Важни се правилата, треба да се знае што се прави, треба да се знае редот по кој што тоа се прави, значи контекстот и дисциплината за справување. Веднаш затоа се појави дека и семејството, пријателите, комшиите се првите кои што им помагаат. Значи, подоцна може да помагаат и општина, и финанси, и технологија и се тоа. Меѓутоа, во оној прв момент на справување, сепак се најблиските тука. Освен семејството, соседите и пријателите.
Thank you so very much, Ivana, for reflection. I could, unfortunately, I couldn't shift to the translation. So if Philip, could you please very briefly say what was the most important so that I can note down?
Yes. So basically, Ivana's point was that in Macedonia, it's really important what you're close. It's really important about the procedures and the formal aspect of the everyday life when it comes, especially for these stressful situations, and also that it's very important to have like that people usually rely on their closest, so friends, relatives, and neighbors. Ivana, do you think I have missed something from your points to remind me?
Не, тоа е дека правилата и процедурите, значи на луѓето им треба ред, им треба контекст, дисциплина и точно знаат што треба да прават за да во моментот се справат. Од после доаѓаат финансиите, од после доаѓаат технологијата.
Okay. So yeah, basically that in that particular moment, finances do not really matter that much. Yeah, it's important for them to have like an environment with procedures, with formalities that will enable them to act.
So it gives a certain sense of safety.
Yes.
When things are defined and things are, in place, that this will happen. That's a very, very, very interesting point for reflection in the future, because as we see, and this pandemic is clearly showing, the world is increasingly getting unpredictable, uncertain. So it's also very interesting. This, I will probably echo what Paulina also said. How do we ourselves mobilize ourselves to be prepared for many kinds of uncertainties, different kinds of changes? This data is supposed to serve many different parties, and especially the decision makers, who should understand what is the sentiment of people on the ground, who need to understand, so that the policies or decisions that they take are adequately absorbed by the people, and then enacted. But this is a very, very, very good point. Thank you so very much for this. It was a good point about community and joint effort. We do have women speak about community and effort, although one of the stories illustrations also discussed about how neighbors helped each other. Thank you very much. You have a well-deserved 15 minutes break. When we come back, and I hope very much that you will be able to stay at minimum 40 minutes more with us, if not full time, so that we can agree on recommendations from your end. What would be the most appropriate action to take in the future? What we should learn more, maybe explore more, or how this data can help you in the future in your work, and maybe have collective effort, community effort on designing something together. Thank you, Maria. Yeah. Okay, 15 minutes and then we're back.
Yes, we're back.
Philip, what's the time now in
it's 2:30.
So we are back at 2:45.
Yes.
Good. For me, it's 5:30, so I'll be back 5:30. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
interviews, because this is not detecting or determining strategic needs. So
yeah. So this was people's, what we are looking at is what people feel, because we have what people's perceptions.
I think I would like to, or we, or Philip, or I don't know who, to ask her to clarify this.
Okay.
We
can, sure.
On this topic, I'm sorry, I don't know what Maria was thinking, but this came to my mind when we're talking about the rules and procedures. One of the places where we can use sub questions is asking people who pointed out that rules and procedures were important for them, in which manner. So instead of guessing what does that mean for them, we might actually find out why exactly do they believe that rules and procedures are important. Because, for example, there was another research, it was about the efficiency of public servants and institutions. And there was these questions, do you think that institutions are, with a name, the institutions were named, whether they're efficient? And a large majority had the first instance reply, no. And there was a sub-question, are you familiar with what this institution does? And the answer was no. So then there was a connection with another research showing that people are in general in Macedonia not satisfied with the institution. So their first reply would be most often negative, without even thinking whether they know anything about that institution. So maybe this would be one of those instances where we can use this.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. This is a very, very, very good point, in the sense that like giving the negative response when we actually might not be aware of the specifics of the matter. There is one angle here. What we can do is not to go back. We don't know who these respondents were, so we cannot go to the same respondents to ask additional questions. What we can do is go deeper into the data set that we already have, go through the narratives that people tell us, see if we can get any additional information from that, and then have another round of consultations, maybe to clarify this particular issue, since it came up as relevant to this particular context. And also look at the other researches and compare, like you just mentioned, how the other research contributes to that. Although I think it is important, by all means. I want to double check, are we recording? Because I stopped the recording before the break. Yeah, okay, good.
Yes,
any other thing that we could clarify, apart from decision-making, rules and procedures, additional one, before we go to recommended actions section? No?
Maybe just one more thing. Now, I'm sorry, I hope I don't.
No, Amelia, this is fine.
I'm happy. I just need to check something. Olgica Apostolska, you were the one presenting another results of another research about gender segregated data on climate change.
Yes.
Yes. So there was, I think, in that research, a point about the help given by, I think, Ministry of Agriculture to people to install sun collectors, I think,
Ministry of, that was the program for protection vulnerable groups for heating.
Yes. Or heating. Okay, because I saw
Ministry of Economy. Actually, there were two programs. One is general to subsidize people with efficient installing efficient devices to heat their homes, and the second one is program for protecting vulnerable users of energy for heating their homes. Yes.
Yes, okay, because I thought that it was about sun collectors, but nevertheless, Do you maybe see somewhere connection with the results of the research you have presented? Because these qualitative data here can give a little bit more color to what you have shown, although of course, since these are individual stories, that has to be, things have to be taken in with a lot of precaution. However, do you think that maybe these two can be somehow interconnected in some points?
That's a very good point.
Yes, I absolutely see a connection, not just in heating or energy users, but in other sectors as well. As I mentioned earlier, that this research gives us a data on gender roles in each of the sector related to climate change. So yeah, different recommendations can and very concrete recommendations should come up from this research in comparison with other findings.
Excellent. Now let's go to, if there are no other additional questions regarding what further can be explored. For example, again, I would go back to the fact that depending on what are we interested to explore, then additional data analysis can be done. But what are the points, based on what we discussed in the first half, what are the points of interest, action, in terms of action? What is the action that we can think of or plan that right now falls within existing programs or activities, and that can be incorporated, that these findings that we have discussed can help incorporating into the existing programs? Can we think about that? So what action can be taken in the existing programs? This is one question. And another question, when we split in groups, and I would ask you to have a discussion in Macedonian, because having discussion in the plenary forces people to speak English or stay quiet, and I wouldn't want that to happen. I want you guys to feel as comfortable as possible. So there are two issues that I would ask you to consider. One is what can be already taken on board in the existing programs in terms of action based on the data that we heard, and what can be kind of a more longer term implication. Some of them we already discussed. You can repeat, not repeat, it doesn't matter. But if in these two groups we could have 5 points, yeah, combining both, I would be very happy to hear. Can we have about 15 minutes of breakout session in 2 groups, random groups? Don't include me, Philip, in any of the groups if possible, because that derails the discussion point. But I want 15 minutes for you to consider, and please put it in copy paste if you want, in terms of action. What action can be taken based on the data that we heard? What action can be taken in the existing programs which are already happening? It can be a program, it can be a strategy, it can be an action plan document, doesn't matter. In whichever process you're involved in, this is one angle, and another angle is in a longer term perspective, how this can possibly contribute to the joint work. Also, please consider not only individual agency needs, but also collectively, like different ministries, community and local governance, international organizations, and just local NGOs or media can be involved in this. Please consider this, all these aspects. I mean, you know better than I do. So, Philip, any questions at this point? Do you need any other information?
No.
Fine. Great. It will be great if Philip, you distribute Olgita, Pavlina, and Maria, and Philip, you distribute in both groups so that you can help with the discussion. and we'll be back with minimum five points from each group. What can be, how can we act upon the issues that we have seen from this data?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go.
So how did it go?
Quite talkative.
Quite talkative.
Very well in our group.
Okay, that's what I was saying. That when you have.
But it's Friday. It's already 3:30.
I know.
So let's speed up. So I think
yes,
that
by all means.
by the end, not many people will stay. So
for me, it's 6:30. So I fully understand you guys. I just want very quickly to wrap up. If you could tell me, I will move to interpretation to English if you feel comfortable in Macedonian, and I will just make notes of those 5 points that you have came to. Please, I'm all ears.
Group 1, are you going to start?
So I can summarize some of the things we talked about in our group. I think I was group 1. So even though I didn't participate, but I was listening very carefully. One of the things we talked about was the way of using the data. So we agreed that the quantitative data should be used to make policies and design actions, whereas the qualitative data or the stories themselves should be used more carefully because they may lead to generalization and other biases. We were also quite surprised to see that men take less climate action, and we didn't really talk too much about it, but we just were all surprised about it. Does anyone else from my group want to share something? This is what I remember right now.
Thank you.
I was in group 1.
Yeah. Was it,
okay.
Emma, was it group 2 or group 1?
Group 1.
Okay.
Just
please.
Points that we also agreed that these findings will be shared with the group developing the new strategy on gender equality for the separate strategic objective, gender and climate change. So they will see if some of the findings, summarizing the findings into more broader strategical measures will be incorporated there based on these findings.
Great.
And yes, that's it.
Okay. What implication does it have from the group one? I'm interested in terms of what Paulina mentioned about the awareness and preparedness for this kind of situations that the climate change is now posing, whether it is disaster or whether it is something that is expected to happen.
Yeah, so we have discussed two things. One that it would be, we didn't include here the Center for Crisis Management, but it's something that could be interesting for them. So it would be good to additionally share the report with the link for them to be able to catch up on the results, but also it would be very difficult for them to use it as it is. So we will ask Philip and Maria to make a short video on how to and send it along. Jacqueline was also mentioning—
Look, Philip's face.
I don't know if Jacqueline is still here. Maybe Jackie, would you be able to add on the UNDP support to the local government?
Yes. There is currently a program which is being developed under the Ministry of Local Self-Government. It is called Program for Sustainable Local Growth and Decentralization. It will cover starting from 2021 until 2026. So it will be a 5-year program. It's in its final stages of development, but it can provide an entry point with the Ministry of Local Self-Government, because the municipalities are a point for citizens to go to in times of crisis, which our recent crisis has shown us, and providing the data to local self-government units and to decision makers will be the logical next step, so that they can include them not only in their planning of the strategies for the following period, but also to plan actual measures of mitigating climate change negative effects, because this research shows them how are men and women affected differently, or what are the specific gaps that we can fulfill, information gap, communication gap, or even technology gap. So that would be one additional value of applying this research on local level.
Excellent. I think this is a very, very good point, Jacqueline, because what you mentioned, it's not only about strategic. What we are discussing now is more general, in general terms, about how the data can be used. But you can actually work more precisely, closely with the actors on the ground to see per each specific issue what action can be planned. So I absolutely agree with you. Did Group 2 have any observations that can fulfill the observations of Group 1, or anything that Group 1 has to add?
Group 2 has also some remarks that we consider as important. So the conclusion is that there is no systematic connection among the experiences, which actually leads that to there is need of refreshing the institutional memory that once existed in some countries, and there is a need of central system for informing the citizens. Like in the case, for example, with the heavy rains, what happened? If there is a functional central system for informing the citizen, then everybody would be prepared about it. And know how to act and what to do beforehand. Also, there is need for suitable infrastructure equipment, let's say bus stops, which are able to protect the citizens from heavy rains. And additionally, in order to solve the issue with the systematic approach for informing the citizens, there is a need of government discussion about how the climate change, based on the initiatives of the people that were that were asked about this issue, can do something in order to implement strategies and actions that can help the entire citizens in order to fight with this. As once also existed, it's really important that the citizens are prepared for these occasions. And for example, it's really important if they are able to swim or if they possess a firefight equipment at their houses in order to be able to face these disasters or whatever it happened.
Excellent. These are very specific, very, very good. What you are dwelling here is about...
Sorry, can I just add one more sentence?
Absolutely.
Yes, and how many women have or possess, no, not possession of driving license, but how many women know how to drive? Doesn't matter whether if they have a license or not, just if they know how to drive, to be able to escape whatever.
Yeah. Excellent. I think it's very interesting that this conversation and that the points that you have raised, it is very much one can swim in the mud. Yes. That this conversation is solely around the disaster kind of mitigation. Although, because this is how we ask the question, like what you remember, the latest climate kind of thing. Although what is important here is that we also have information about agriculture needs, that people are speaking about, talking about drought, how drought is affected the agriculture needs, how beekeeping is, suffering or not suffering from this. So there can be exploration of, I mean, the things that people are talking about somehow are not on the surface. So connecting that actual needs with in agriculture or any other field are also important. Thank you so very much. For me, this is more than enough to conclude our report. The initial.
Имаше простор за уште една точка.
Yeah, just a minute. I need to. Please.
Сакам да кажам дека, бидејќи констатиравме дека на собствено искуство се темалат активностите за справување со кризите, тогаш како препорака може да биде и дека во формалното образование може да се вклучи дел од ова. Значи, да се изучуваат некакви, не знам, видови активности за справување во вакви ситуации.
Absolutely. And
there
also
is one more comment in the chat box, Katuna.
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking. Thank you. I don't have it. I don't have the comment.
One cannot swim in mud.
One
yeah,
in the mud, but they can drown in the mud.
Yes, it's an absolute real threat, actually. But what I was saying is that when it comes to planning these specific activities, I think, Paulina, we had a discussion, I mean, quick catch up on that as well. It is interesting when you make the link between training or formal education, and then what happens after that. So before asking people to combining education and skills development and learning with actual follow-up actions. For example, Jacqueline, when you mentioned the local governance activities, in our previous researches, for example, on the green economy, for example, in Belarus, if I'm not mistaken, we were looking at how effective were public awareness campaigns. And they were different from region to region in the country, from municipality to municipality, depending on whether they were coupled with the actual training and then grant scheme, or whether it was information campaign and training, or whether it was only information campaign and grant financial support scheme. So thinking about this kind of combinations is also very helpful and interesting, especially at the local level. Yeah. Any other points? I'm mindful of time.
No.
No. I think this is it. What next steps, what comes next? First of all, thank you very much for staying till the very end and contributing to this work. I fully understand that it is not easy in our circumstances to sit by the computer for more than 2.5 hours now. Our next step is we will be issuing a report with the key findings. So these are key findings. All the stakeholders then continue exploration on the website or ask us to be involved. We will be able to finalize with the recommendations that you have provided. The section on the recommendations at the moment is empty because we needed the practitioner advice before putting something there. So we will consolidate whatever we discussed today and share with you for feedback before we put it in the report. If you have any additional ideas, any comments, if you would like to go back and then reflect on them, please feel free to send it to the project team so that we can take them on board. My contacts are here. You can contact me anytime, really, and if there is anything I can do to help, I'll be happy to. And Philippe's contacts are now in the chat as well. So I think this is it. Thank you for excellent work. Thank you very much. We usually take 2 days to do this, so you can imagine how well you've done.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Zach. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So there we are. Thanks, Latko.
Thanks to everyone in the group.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.